Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the GSL-English podcast. My name is Gideon, and this is a podcast for all learners of English to practice and improve in a relaxed and natural way. And in this episode, we are going to talk about something that all of us have done. I know I've done it, and I'm sure you've done it as well. It's something that I think humans have always done, whether for good or for bad. What am I talking about? Well, this episode is all about judging people on first impressions. So what do we mean by that? Well, of course, when we judge someone, we're forming an opinion of that person, of who we think they are, what their personality is like, what type of person are they? And if we're judging someone on first impressions, we are forming that quite strong opinion on what we first see. So we don't know the person, we don't know who they are, we don't know their story, but we are judging on what we first see. And whether we like it or not, we have a tendency to do that. So in this episode, we are going to talk about why we do that. What does it mean when we do that? Does it even matter? So that's the idea of today's episode. And of course, the focus of this episode and this podcast is to help you with your English. So we've got loads we're going to go through today. We're going to have some reading practice. So we're going to start off, as we do always, with just reading the article in its entirety. So you can read along with me, you can speak along with me, you can practice that a few times. And then afterwards, we're going to go through the article section by section, making sure we understand what it's talking about and the different reference points. And also we'll break down any vocabulary that I think could be helpful to you. So if you are new here, please do give it a subscribe, introduce yourself in the comments. And if you are a returning viewer or listener, as always, you know I appreciate your support. Thank you for tuning in to the podcast every Sunday at 10 o'clock. I do greatly appreciate it. So we're going to get into it, but you will know, if you're a regular viewer or listener, I do encourage, if at all possible, to just relax a little bit and enjoy the English language with me. So if you want to go grab a cup of tea, grab a cup of coffee, get some food, make yourself a little snack, treat yourself just to a little bit of you time. I do encourage it. And of course, although we're going through the English language, this isn't about stressful studying. This is just to enjoy it and go through some interesting topics with me. So I do hope you can just unwind a little bit today. So here we go. First impressions. Why your brain judges people before you even realize it. So as I said, what we're going to do, going to read the entire, try that again. We're going to read the article in its entirety. There you go. So read along with me if I don't mess it up like I just did. Read along with me, shadow read with me, speak at the same time, or just enjoy it, just listen. And then afterwards we're going to break it down. So here we go. Imagine you're at a party. Someone walks through the door. Within seconds, you've already decided whether they seem friendly, confident, trustworthy, intelligent, or perhaps a little intimidating. The strange thing is that you haven't spoken to them yet. How is that possible? It turns out that the human brain is remarkably good at making rapid judgments. Psychologists call these judgments first impressions, and they are one of the most fascinating aspects of human behaviour. One of the most surprising discoveries in psychology is just how quickly first impressions are formed. Research suggests that people can form impressions of others in a fraction of a second. In some studies, participants made judgments about a person's trustworthiness, competence, and likability after seeing a face for only a brief moment. In everyday life, we rarely have the time or information needed to fully understand a person when we first meet them. As a result, our brains naturally look for patterns and clues that help us make quick judgments. We do this in job interviews, first dates, business meetings, classrooms, and countless social situations. Whether we realize it or not, we are constantly forming impressions of the people around us. One of the most famous concepts in psychology is called thin slicing. The term was introduced by psychologists Nailani Ambady and Robert Rosenthal. It refers to our ability to make surprisingly accurate judgments based on very small amounts of information. In one famous study, students watched very short video clips of teachers. Remarkably, the opinions they formed were often similar to the opinions of students who had spent an entire semester with those teachers. Think about that for a moment. A few seconds of observation sometimes produced impressions that matched months of experience. It sounds almost unbelievable, but it highlights just how much information humans communicate through body language, facial expressions, posture, eye contact, and tone of voice. Many people assume that communication begins when we start talking. Psychologists would disagree. Long before we speak, other people are already gathering information from our body language, facial expressions, posture, eye contact, and tone of voice. This explains why two people can say exactly the same sentence and creates completely different impressions. Imagine someone saying, "Nice to meet you." If they smile warmly, maintain eye contact, and speak confidently, they may seem friendly and approachable. If they avoid eye contact, mumble, and appear uncomfortable, the impression may be very different. The words are identical, the message is not. Of course, there is a problem. Human beings are not perfectly objective. While first impressions can sometimes be surprisingly accurate, they can also be influenced by stereotypes, assumptions, and unconscious biases. A shy person may be perceived as unfriendly. A nervous person may appear unprepared. A quiet person may be mistaken for someone lacking confidence. In reality, none of these conclusions may be true. The brain loves quick answers, but quick answers are not always correct. Another reason first impressions are so powerful is something psychologists call the primacy effect. This refers to our tendency to place greater importance on the information we receive first. Once we've formed an initial opinion about someone, we often begin to look for evidence that supports that opinion while ignoring evidence that contradicts it. Imagine meeting someone who seems rude during your first interaction. If they behave kindly later, you may continue interpreting their actions through the lens of that original impression. The first chapter of the story can influence how we read the rest of the book. Fortunately, first impressions are not permanent. As we spend more time with people, we gather more information. We see them in different situations. We learn about their experiences, values, strengths, and weaknesses. The more information we have, the less dependent we become on those initial judgments. Many of us have experienced this personally. Perhaps you've met someone and immediately disliked them, only to discover later that they became a close friend. Or perhaps you've been deeply impressed by someone at first, only to realize later that your initial judgment was wrong. Human beings are complicated, and no 5-second impression can ever capture an entire personality. The science of first impressions teaches us two important lessons. First, our brains are extraordinary. We are constantly processing huge amounts of social information without even realizing it. Second, we should remain humble about our judgments. The person we think we understand after 5 seconds may be completely different after 5 hours, 5 weeks, or 5 months. Perhaps the most intelligent response is to treat first impressions as a starting point rather than a final verdict. After all, Every person is a story, and no story can be understood from the first sentence alone. There you go. What a fantastic article. I just really enjoyed the way that it is written. So what we're going to do now, yeah, actually, if you feel like you do just want to listen to that again, just to get it in your head and see how much you can comprehend, please do. There's no rush, just enjoy it. So what we're going to do now is just analyze each section and then go through some of the vocabulary. So it started off by, setting the scene. Imagine you're at a party, or this can be in any social setting. Someone walks through the door. Within seconds, we've made a decision, whether they are friendly, meaning that they're welcoming, you'd like to talk to them, whether they're confident, how do they handle themselves, whether they are trustworthy, are they honest, are they reliable. Trustworthy is a great way to describe someone if they are. For example, she seemed trustworthy from the moment we met. Intelligence, or perhaps we make the judgment that they're a little intimidating. If someone is intimidating, they can often make one feel a little bit nervous, or they can make us lack confidence. We're intimidated by them. But we're making all of this before we've even spoken to them. So we're forming these massive opinions about someone's personality before we've even spoken to them. And if we think about that, that is a remarkable or surprising thing that humans do. We make rapid judgments. When we do something rapidly, we do it very fast. And it really is a fascinating aspect of human behavior. The fact that we make these rapid judgments, we form these opinions about someone before we've even met them. So here it's setting the tone, just letting us know how incredible this is. We form this such strong opinion of someone before we know anything about them. So that's really what we're talking about. And just as a reminder, if you are following along on the screen, I have put down some of the vocabulary that might help you. I do encourage you just to watch along with that, because I'm going to go through some of it, but only when it's necessary. I'm not going to go through all of it. So hopefully that'll just give you a bit of a guide as to some of these words. So that sets the scene nicely. So then we talk about one of the most surprising discovery, something new, something learned in psychology. And this is just how quickly first impressions are formed. So research suggests that these first impressions, this first opinion, are formed or created within a fraction of a second. When we use this phrase to describe fraction of a second, we're talking about a minimal, an extremely short period of time. So research is telling us that this first impression is basically made the click of a finger. It's made. In some studies, people made judgments, that opinion about trustworthiness, how much we trust someone. Competence, that was an interesting word. If someone is competent, they're able to do something. Likability, how much we're going to like them. After seeing their face for only a few brief moments. So we're basing that. These qualities or these things that we might look for in a friend after years and years, we're judging that by their face for a brief moment. Basically, our brain is making decisions before our conscious mind has even caught up. So when we talk about that, our conscious mind, when we are conscious of something, we are aware. We know that it's happening. So here it's saying that this judgment, this first impression, our brain is doing that before consciously we've even realized. And in everyday life, we rarely, we don't often have the time or information needed to fully understand people when we first meet them. So our brain is looking for patterns or looking for clues, information that can just help us to understand someone so that we can form an impression. And when we talk about forming an impression, we're creating an opinion about someone. So it's interesting, isn't it? We do this in so many settings in life. Perhaps now you can think of the last time that you formed an opinion of a first impression. Maybe it was on a first date. Maybe it was you started a new job, or that there was a new employee at your work. Think about, what was your first impression of that person? And I think what's really interesting is if you think about what made you form that impression. What was it about them? Did they come in a bit arrogant, a bit smug, and you didn't like it? Or did they come in really chilled and humble and you did like it? So kind of, we're seeing here that first impressions are set often subconsciously before we know that it's happening. So the next section went into why this happened. And we're looking at this concept. A concept is an idea or a principle. Interesting word, concept. We often use it to talk about something before it is fully imagined or fully real. I love cars, as many of you know. And sometimes a brand will release a concept car, which is an idea. It's a principle of a car before it's put into production. So here we're talking about the concept, an idea or a principle, and this is called thin slicing. And thin slicing is basically making judgments on limited information. It's our ability to make surprisingly accurate judgments based on very small amounts of information. So when we talk here about our judgments being accurate, they're correct, very close to the truth. And I think this is the really interesting part of it, that very often our subconscious judgments based on a first impression can actually be quite accurate. And that's really, really interesting. So we got this study that it kind of spoke about here. So what it did was gave students, they watched very short video clips of teachers. So maybe just teaching their class, perhaps the interaction with the students. But remarkably, again, use that word remarkably or surprisingly, the opinions they formed were often similar to the opinions of students had spent an entire semester or half an academic year with those teachers. So some students, given a really short video, their opinion of that teacher was very similar to the ones that had spent perhaps 6 months with that teacher. So then it gives us this moment to pause, just think about that for a moment. That's a great way, if you're writing an article and you want to add impact to a certain point, so you want to get the reader to think, little sentences like that, little statements, almost demanding what the reader do. Think about that for a moment. It really brings gravitas to your next point. And the point that it says is that a few seconds of observation, watching, produced impressions that matched months of experience. So that first impression, it was similar to the impression after months. So why does that happen? Well, it's true. It does sound almost unbelievable. We can't believe it. But it highlights just how much information humans communicate. Now, we've got a few different things here. How much we communicate through body language. Body language is the communication through physical movements and expression. So what we do with our arms, the way we move, the way we hold ourselves, it's speaking. Our facial expressions, what we do with our face. We're frowning, our eyebrows are up. We scrunch our lips together. All of this is forms of communication. Eye contact. Do we look at somebody in the eye? Posture. The way we sit, the way we stand. Are our shoulders back? Are they rounded? Our tone of voice. The way in which we say something. This is all part of gathering information. Long before we speak, this has happened. And many people assume or come to the assumption or conclusion that communication only begins when we start talking. But it doesn't. Long before we speak, people are gathering information from us, from our body language, from our facial expressions, our posture, our eye contact, our tone of voice with others. That's really interesting, particularly when we think about communication, which of course is the idea behind this podcast. It's all about helping us to communicate better in English. We focus on words naturally. Of course, that's important. But this is a point to take away from this. That if we want to make an impression at work, in a social setting, it's little things to think about here. The way we hold ourselves, our posture, our facial expressions make a big difference to that first interaction. Then it gives the example here of imagine someone saying, "Nice to meet you." Okay, someone says nice to meet you, and I'll give you two ideas here. Someone says it with this warm smile that they get eye contact with you. You know, "Oh, it's really nice to meet you." It's quite welcoming, isn't it? But if someone avoids eye contact and they go, "Yep, nice to meet you," they mumble, speak very quietly or unclearly, "Yep, nice to meet you." It's almost uncomfortable, isn't it? That first impression is going to be very different. That the words are exactly the same, but the message they're translating is very different. "Oh, nice to meet you." Eye contact, it's friendly. Looking, "Nice to meet you." Very different things, aren't they? So it kind of says to us here that it's not language and communication is not just about words. Sometimes the words are almost less important than the way that we say it. Our body language, what is our face saying? Our words might be saying one thing, but our face, our body language could be sending a completely different message. And that's what makes us approachable, friendly, and easy to talk to, or unapproachable, meaning that people don't want to approach us. But there's a problem with this. Interestingly, here it says that human beings are not perfectly objective, meaning that we don't base everything on facts rather than feelings. While first impressions can be surprisingly accurate, they can also be influenced by a variety of different things. Stereotypes. We might create an opinion based on a simplified belief about a group of people. We might notice something about their appearance, who they are. That stereotype can affect our first impression, unfortunately, or it can be in a positive way. Assumptions. We see or notice something about someone. We create an assumption of who we think they are based on what we're seeing. Or unconscious biases. A bias is a tendency to favour one view unfairly. And if we're doing this unconsciously, we're not even knowing that we're doing it. It's ingrained in us. For example, a shy person, someone that is just a little bit intimidated by social settings, they might be perceived, seen or understood as unfriendly. A nervous person may appear unprepared. A quiet person may be mistaken for someone lacking confidence. In reality, the truth is that none of these conclusions, an opinion that we've come to, that is reached at the end, could be true. A shy person might be the most friendly person we could meet. A nervous person might be the most prepared. A quiet person might actually be full of confidence. So because of those unconscious biases, because of those stereotypes, we're not completely objective in that situation. It goes on to say that another reason first impressions are so powerful is what we call the primacy effect. Primacy or primacy? I need to look that up, actually. I meant to do that before I started writing this episode. So primacy or primacy? I think it's primacy. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm always open to being corrected. So with this primacy effect, we're going to go with that. It's the tendency to remember and value information received first. So we place greater importance on the information that we received first. For example, once we've formed an initial opinion, first opinion initially, about someone, we often begin looking for evidence, facts that support that opinion. So, and this is really interesting. So we create that first impression of someone, we judge them, we create that first impression. Then what we are doing is we are looking for evidence to back up that first impression. But on the contrary, what we'll often do is ignore the evidence that contradicts it, that shows that it is not true. If it is a contradiction, it's against that idea. And that's where the problem lies in first impressions. We create that first impression, then we're looking for the evidence to back it up. Very often as humans, we're not looking for the evidence to contradict it or to prove that first impression wrong. And I guess this can go positively or negatively, but it depends how we perceive that person. Because let's be honest, sometimes we just look at someone and think, yeah, we like them. We don't know what it is about them, but we just like them. So we're looking for evidence to back that up. On the flip side, we might just not really like someone and it's based on nothing. Our first impression is we don't like them and we don't want to like them. And we're just looking for information that backs that up, not contradicts it. Imagine, for example, you meet someone and they're rude during your first interaction. Maybe they were shy and they did that, nice to meet you, didn't look you in the eyes and they mumbled. Even if they behave kindly later, you could be interpreting their actions through the lens or through the understanding or the perception of that original impression. So although they're kind and nice to you later, you're looking at it through that lens of your first impression. That first chapter of the story can influence how we read the rest of the book. Interesting, isn't it? But fortunately, first impressions aren't permanent, or they don't have to be permanent. I think that's more of an interesting way of saying that. As we spend time with people, we gather or we collect more information. We see them in different situations, different settings, how they interact with others. We learn about their experiences, their values, their strengths, and their weaknesses. And the more information we have, the less dependent or the less we rely on those initial judgments. And we have all experienced this personally. Perhaps you've met someone, or perhaps someone has met us. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Rather than putting the shoe on someone else's foot, let's look in the mirror. Maybe someone's looked at us and just immediately disliked us. And you can just tell. You know when someone's giving you the vibe that they just don't really like you. Only to discover later that actually you're all right. You're not as bad as they thought. You're a decent person and you become friends. Or, alternatively, perhaps you like someone based on first impressions. You're impressed by them, only to realise that first judgment was wrong. The truth is, human beings are complicated. No 5-second impression can ever capture an entire personality. It cannot happen. So there's 2 important lessons from this. Our brains are extraordinary, which they are, meaning they're remarkable, they're incredible things. And we are constantly processing huge amounts of social information, even when we don't know it. Our brains are always switched on. Secondly, we should remain humble about our judgments. And if we remain humble about them, we're not overly proud of them, we're not stuck to them, they can change. The person we think we understand after that first impression, they could be different once we have a chat for a few hours, 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years. Perhaps the most intelligent response is to treat those first impressions as a starting point. And I think what's really interesting about this article is it's not telling us to not form a first impression, because that's going to happen. And sometimes, very often, our gut is right. But even if we get a first impression and we don't take to someone, that's not the be all and end all. It's just a starting point rather than the final verdict, final opinion or decision about that person. Okay, that's the starting point. We don't quite take to them, but they could end up being the best of friends. So I guess it's all about controlling where we go after that first impression. Being willing to change, willing to roll with it, and rather than trying to find evidence to back up that first impression. No, I think that's incorrect. I'm going to change that. Because we might have a positive first impression, I think it's really important that we look for evidence to back that up. But I guess particularly if this is in a more judgmental, negative way, not looking for evidence to always back up that negative view, but perhaps being open to the ideas that contradict it. But every person is a story. No story can be understood from the first sentence alone. It's funny, I was in London with some friends last night. Yeah, Friday night, recording this on Saturday. And we were looking around. We were people watching. We love a bit of people watching. And we're just saying, how interesting is it that everyone we see right now, we're creating a first impression. I was talking about this topic with them just to see if they think it's an interesting one for the podcast. We create that first impression, but the truth is everybody's got their own story. Everybody's either having a good day, an average day, or a really bad day. And imagine someone's having a terrible day. We create that first impression, but they could be the best human there is. They could be the best friend. They could be exactly the person we need in our life, but they're just having a bad day. And I think it comes down to the idea of, okay, we do create that first impression. We do it naturally, but just leaving loads of room around that impression to change. Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was a really interesting topic. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Yeah. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. Have you got any experiences based around that, first impressions that ended up being incorrect? Or do you think first impressions are important? Do you think it's essential that we set a good first impression? Or is time the biggest tell? Yeah, let me know. So if you did get to this point of the podcast, please write impression in the comments. Impression, just to let me know you got here. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope you came away with something new from today's episode. Yeah, and I'll see you all next week. Have a good one, guys.